I lived a life no one knew, and I'll leave it that way.
If you're still here with me tonight, thank you. I don't know your name, and you don't know mine, but maybe for the next little while we can just sit here together. Just you and a voice from someone who lived a life in silence. I've always been the quiet kind. I never took up too much space. I didn't ask for much. I paid my bills, minded my own business, watered my little plants, and for most people that's all I was, the old woman in 3B. No family visits, no loud TV, no noise. But once I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. I danced barefoot in the rain. I had someone who looked at me like I was their whole world. I had a life, a real, messy, beautiful, painful life. That's what this letter is. Not a cry for help, not some final dramatic moment, just a voice, hoping to be remembered by someone, anyone. Because soon, someone will find this letter, folded on the nightstand beside the bed I won't wake up in, and when they read it, maybe, just maybe, they'll know that I was here. I don't want flowers, I don't want prayers, I just want to speak, one last time. And if you'll let me, I'd like to tell you the story of the life I lived, and why I never told it until now.
It started with a ringing phone, but it wasn't mine. It was my neighbour's, Mrs. Green. She lives just down the hall. Her voice always carries through the walls, especially when she laughs. I was making tea when I heard it. That kind of laugh that bubbles up from a place deeper than the throat. Laughter that only comes when something or someone fills your heart unexpectedly. Her daughter was calling. She was bringing the grandkids over. They were planning a Sunday visit, a picnic in the park maybe. One of the little ones had just lost their first tooth. You could hear the joy in her voice like it spilled over into the hallway. I stood still for a moment, my hand resting on the counter, listening like it was a radio playing memories I never had. When the call ended, I looked at my own phone on the kitchen table, face down, still, like it always is. I picked it up, just to make sure. No missed calls, no messages, no one checking in, no one wondering where I've been. I haven't changed the wallpaper in years. It's still a picture of a lake I visited once, back when traveling meant something to me. I sat down at the table, tea growing cold, phone back in its place, a silent companion. I tried to remember the last time someone called just to say hello, just to hear my voice, not for a bill, not for an appointment, not for a scam pretending to care. I couldn't remember. I live alone. It's not a tragedy, not in the way people think. I have neighbors. I nod at the mailman. Sometimes I even exchange pleasantries at the store. But that's not connection, that's routine. Connection is when someone calls because they miss the sound of your voice, because they want to know how your day is even if it's the same as yesterday. And in that moment, sitting there with cold tea and silence, I realize something that shouldn't have surprised me. When I leave this world, there won't be anyone wondering why I haven't picked up the phone. No one will worry if I don't show up. No one will notice the quiet right away. It will take time. Maybe the landlord will knock. Maybe a neighbor will smell something. Maybe a utility company will flag unpaid bills. But no one will miss me the way Mrs. Green's daughter would miss her if she didn't answer her phone. And that's okay, really. I've made peace with it. This is not a cry for pity. It's just the truth. The simple, quiet truth of a life lived without echo. Before all this quiet, before the walls grew this still, I loved someone. His name was Daniel. He had this way of looking at you like you were the most interesting page in a book. Not the first page, not the last, just the one he wanted to stay on a little longer. He wasn't loud, he wasn't charming in the traditional sense. But he listened, he saw people, he saw me. We met at the post office, of all places. He was in line ahead of me, arguing with the clerk because his package got lost. He wasn't angry, just flustered. I remember he kept apologizing even when it wasn't his fault. We walked out at the same time, and I made a joke about how he should write a letter to complain. He laughed. That laugh, it stayed with me. We ended up getting coffee at the corner cafe. It became our place. Every Wednesday, 2 mugs, 1 old table in the back. Him always with a crossword, me always pretending to read. We made plans, big ones and small. We talked about getting a little house with chipped paint and a stubborn garden. about hanging a yellow curtain in the kitchen, about names for children we weren't even sure we'd have. And then, one rainy evening, a truck didn't stop at the light. Daniel was gone. Just like that. I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell him the news. Because I was pregnant. Barely a few weeks, I had just found out. I'd bought a tiny pair of socks, wrapped them in tissue, planned to give them to him over dinner. That dinner never happened. A few days later, I lost the baby too. They said it was stress. They said it was common. They said I'd heal. But how do you heal from losing both the person and the possibility of the life you were about to have? I didn't date after that. Didn't try, didn't want to. I had already given my heart away, and it never came back. People think choosing to live alone is a decision, but for me, it was simply what was left.
People often think grief is loud. They imagine it in sobs, in shouting, in breaking plates. But mine was quiet. So quiet it scared me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry at the funeral. I remember standing there in a black coat that didn't even belong to me, watching strangers throw dirt on the man I loved. I remember thinking, this can't be it. There has to be more. But there wasn't. After the miscarriage, I moved back into my little apartment. The same walls, the same windows, only now they echoed differently. I boxed up the baby socks. I never opened that drawer again. I went back to work, smiled when I needed to, laughed when it was appropriate, told people I was doing fine. And the truth is, they believed me, because I was good at hiding it, at looking okay. But inside I lived in rewind. I'd wake up in the morning and picture Daniel brushing his teeth beside me. I'd walk past the cafe and still glance at our table, half expecting him to be there, crossword in hand. Every birthday I lit a candle, for the baby who never made it to the world. No one knew, no one asked, no one noticed. That's when the quiet began to grow roots. At first I thought I was healing. I told myself, this is peace. But it wasn't peace. It was numbness dressed as peace. And it stayed. People came and went. Friends drifted. Life moved on. But I didn't. I stayed in that apartment, kept the same furniture, the same chipped plates, the same habit of talking to the kettle while it boiled. And you know what? It was enough. Not joyful, not heartbreaking, just enough. Until one day I realized something. I had built a life that no one else was part of, and I started to wonder if anyone even remembered I had once been part of theirs. Her name was Claire. She was my closest friend after Daniel died. We met at work, 2 women in a small office filled with too many men and not enough sunlight. She had a wild laugh, the kind that made heads turn, and eyes that always searched yours even when you tried to look away. Claire didn't let people hide. She saw through me like glass. Knew I was crumbling long before I admitted it to myself. After Daniel's death, she showed up at my door every Sunday. No warning, just a knock, and then the smell of garlic bread and too much wine. Sometimes we didn't talk, we just sat on the couch and listened to old jazz records. Sometimes she let me cry. Other times she told me funny stories about her dog, just to make me forget for 5 minutes that I was broken. But as the months passed, I started cancelling. Started closing the curtains when she knocked, letting the phone ring out. Not because I didn't love her, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I wasn't getting better. Ashamed that I was still stuck in that grief when everyone else had moved on. I thought if she saw me like that, still hollow, still empty, she'd leave. So I left first. I cut her out before she could cut me off. I told myself I was protecting her, told myself I didn't need anyone. But the truth? Claire was the only person who ever stayed. And I pushed her away because I didn't believe I deserved to be held together when I was falling apart. I never heard from her again.
Never saw her at work after that. She moved away, or maybe she just moved on. I kept her number in an old address book for years. I never dialed it. And now, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't know where to find her. If she ever hears this, Claire, I'm sorry, you tried, and I should have let you. After Claire, I stopped pretending I was okay. But in public, I still wore the mask. At work, I was known as the woman who never took sick days, who brought her lunch in the same brown paper bag every day, who stayed late, never complained, and always sent polite emails. I wasn't special, but I was dependable, predictable, forgettable. People would say things like, "You're always so calm," or "You're so private, must be nice to have peace." And I'd smile, because that's what you do when the truth would make the room too uncomfortable. The truth was, I wasn't peaceful. I was simply unseen. It's strange how easy it is to go unnoticed when you don't make noise. I took the same bus every morning, sat in the same seat, walked into the same building with the same black coffee in hand. No one ever asked me what I did on weekends. No one invited me to after-hours drinks. No one remembered my birthday. And maybe I made it that way. Maybe I built the walls because I was tired of losing people once they saw the real version of me. The version that still dreamed about a baby who never cried. The version that still smelled Daniel's cologne every time it rained. The version that could talk for hours but never did because there was no one left to listen. And over the years, I got good at existing. Not living, just existing. Filling the days with things to do, folding laundry, washing dishes that only I had used, dusting shelves that never changed. I used to keep a list on my fridge, things to look forward to, little things, a new book, fresh flowers, the full moon. But as time passed, the list got shorter. And then one day, I stopped writing on it altogether. Not because I was sad, but because I realized I had stopped expecting anything new. There was one time, just once, when I thought maybe, just maybe, I could feel something again. It was at the public library. Every Thursday, I'd sit in the same corner chair with a copy of something I never really read. It was just a place to be around people without needing to speak. One afternoon, a man asked if he could sit across from me. He looked about my age, maybe a little younger. His sweater had a tear near the elbow, and he smelled faintly of peppermint. He smiled. Not the kind of smile men give when they want something. No, his was different. Soft, gentle. Like he was smiling just to say, "Hello, I see you." We started talking. At first, it was about books, then music, then memories. He'd lost his wife 5 years before, said the silence at home was the hardest part. I understood. For a few weeks, we met there. Every Thursday. Same table, same books, same tea from the vending machine. It wasn't romantic. Not exactly. But it could have been. He asked if I'd like to have lunch sometime. Outside the library. Somewhere with windows and people and maybe laughter. I said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because something inside me froze. I told myself I was too old, too broken, too used to being alone. I told myself I'd ruin it. And so, I let the moment pass. The next week, he wasn't there. Nor the one after that. Maybe he took the hint. Maybe he felt rejected. Maybe he just gave up. I never saw him again. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I'd just said yes. If I had let him in. If I'd believed that even after all the years, someone could still choose me. But I didn't. And so, He became just another name in the long list of things I never allowed myself to keep. I suppose some of this quietness, this loneliness, didn't start with Daniel. It started much earlier. With her. My mother. She wasn't cruel, not in the way that leaves bruises, but in the way that leaves you questioning whether you were ever really wanted. She kept the house spotless, made dinner at the same time every night, folded towels like they were on display in a magazine. But she never kissed my forehead, never said, "I'm proud of you," never asked, "Are you okay?" She believed in duty, in control, in not making a fuss. If I cried, she told me to pull myself together. If I laughed too loud, she gave me that look. You know the one, the look that makes joy shrink inside your chest. I spent my childhood trying not to need too much, trying to be the good daughter, quiet, polite, unnoticed. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that love, real love, was earned by being small. I didn't even tell her about Daniel. Not after the accident, not about the baby, not about the nights I couldn't breathe, because I knew what she'd say. You'll get over it. Everyone does. So instead of hearing that, I chose silence. And silence became my mother tongue. She got sick in her 70s. Lung cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She never smoked a day in her life, but somehow the quiet found a way to take her too. I moved back into my childhood home, same creaky floorboards, same yellow curtains, same quiet tension hanging between the walls. I told myself this was our chance to talk, to forgive, to become something closer to what mothers and daughters are supposed to be. Some nights, I sat beside her bed just listening to her breathe, and I thought, maybe now she'll open up. Maybe she'll say, "I missed you," or "I wish I'd known." But she didn't. She talked about bills, groceries, the weather. Not once did she ask about my life. Not Daniel, not the baby, not even Claire. I think she was afraid of going there, of opening a door too late. On the last night, I held her hand. It was cold and trembling, and all I could think to say was, "It's okay, Mom, you can go." And she did, without a word. No apology, no closure, just the same silence she'd always given me, only this time it was final. After the funeral, I walked back into that empty house, stood in her room, and realized something that still echoes in me to this day. I had outlived the only person who ever saw my entire life, and still never truly knew me. That was the last time I ever expected anything from another human being, and I haven't hoped since. It happened on a Monday, or maybe a Sunday, I don't really know. What I do know is that it was raining, and someone was missing. His name was Sam. He lived on the 5th floor, 2 levels above me. We weren't friends, barely neighbors. Just 2 quiet souls passing each other in the hallway. He always wore the same coat. Even in summer, always carried a paper bag from the corner deli, and he nodded, always nodded when we made eye contact. But we never spoke. Until he stopped nodding. 1 week, 2 weeks passed, and no one saw him. The hallway stayed quiet. His mailbox started to fill. I remembered noticing the smell before anyone else mentioned it. It wasn't foul, not at first, just off, like something had gone stale. They found him lying beside his couch, no sign of struggle, no sign of company. The newspaper was still open on the table, coffee cup half full, TV remote in hand. He'd been gone for days before anyone thought to check. I stood outside my door that evening, listening to the sounds of the gurney wheels echo down the hall, and I remember thinking, that could have been me. One day, that will be me. No one cried for him. No flowers were left. No family came. The super cleaned out his apartment within a week, and just like that, Sam disappeared. And the building moved on. The hallway filled again. The mailboxes reset. The silence returned. But I didn't. I couldn't forget, because Sam had become a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw what waited for me. Not fear, not pain, just nothing. There was a night, about 5 winters ago, when I sat on the edge of my bed and wondered if anyone would notice if I just stopped. I wasn't sad, not in the way people picture it. There were no tears, no shaking hands, no final notes, just stillness. The kind of stillness that settles into your bones after years of being forgotten. That night, the wind was howling through the windows. My tea had gone cold, the heat had shut off early again, and I looked at the walls around me, yellowed from time, lined with books I no longer read, and thought, maybe this is the right time to go. I opened the drawer where I kept the pills. Not a lot, but enough. I lined them up, 3, 4, 5, and then there was a sound. Not loud, not urgent, just soft, insistent, a faint scratching at the door. I opened it, and there she was, a small, soaking wet tabby cat, thin, shivering, eyes wide and wild. She didn't meow, she didn't move. She just stared at me like she had been looking for someone and finally found them. I wrapped her in a towel, warmed milk, let her sleep beside me on the couch I hadn't shared in years. I never gave her a name. She stayed 3 nights and then she was gone, disappeared just as quietly as she arrived. But those 3 nights, I didn't feel alone. I didn't think about the pills, I didn't think about leaving. I still don't know if she was real, but I like to believe she was. That maybe someone, something sent her just in time. And that tiny heartbeat beside mine reminded me I was still here. I was reaching for the light switch. It was late, too late to still be up, but I couldn't sleep again. The floors were cold, my socks were thin, and just like that, my foot slipped. I hit the tiles hard. It wasn't the pain that startled me, it was the sound, that sharp, echoing crack as my hip met the floor, and then silence. I tried to sit up, I couldn't. I reached for the sink, missed, tried again, nothing. So I laid there, flat on my back, staring at the ceiling I hadn't looked at in years. It had a water stain I'd never noticed before, shaped like a bird, maybe a dove, maybe just my imagination. I laid there for hours. No one called, no one knocked. There were no voices in the hallway, no neighbors stomping by. Just me, and the slow realization, if I didn't get up, no one would know. Steady but hollow tone, no one would come looking, not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe not for days. It wasn't a dramatic thought, it was a practical one, simple math. I had removed myself from the world, and now the world had returned the favor. Eventually I got up, bruised, shaky, embarrassed, though no one had seen. I bandaged my elbow, made tea with my left hand, and sat in the same spot I always do, wondering if I just lived through a warning. There's a drawer in my hallway with pens I never use, and notebooks that smell like old paper and dust. I used to love writing, poetry, little stories, nothing worth publishing, but enough to make me feel alive. When I was a girl, I wanted to be a writer. I thought I'd live in a cabin by the sea, wear thick sweaters, drink coffee, and write about life as if I understood it. But then, life happened, and somewhere between grief and routine, I stopped telling stories, stopped believing mine mattered. But last week, after the fall, after the silence, I opened that drawer, took out a notebook, and just began. I didn't know what I was writing. It wasn't a diary, it wasn't a will. It was something in between. A collection of thoughts, memories, tiny truths I hadn't spoken out loud in years. I wrote about Daniel, about the baby, about Claire, even about the cat that saved me for 3 nights. And as I wrote, something shifted. The silence didn't feel as heavy. No one will read these pages, I know that, but somehow they became a mirror reflecting a life that had felt invisible for so long. And for the first time in years, I thought, maybe I don't need to be remembered by everyone, just someone, even if that someone is the voice reading this now. Her name was Mrs. Langley. She lived across the hall from me for over 20 years. We weren't close, but we had a rhythm. She'd leave a piece of junk mail outside my door when it landed in her box by mistake, and I'd water her plants when she forgot. Every morning at 8:05, I'd hear her kettle whistle. She always left the window open just enough for the scent of burnt toast to drift into the hallway. She loved toast, with too much butter, and the sound of the radio playing soft piano music. And then one morning, the kettle didn't whistle. The mail stayed untouched. The plants drooped. By the third day, I knew. They found her slumped in her armchair, still wearing her robe. The radio was still on. The toast had never been made. The chair where she always sat was empty now. And something about that empty chair, broke something in me. I stood in my doorway that evening looking at hers and realized how thin the thread was between being here and not. No grand exit, no farewell, just a cup not poured, a chair not filled. And I thought, when I'm gone, will anyone know what time my kettle used to whistle? Will anyone notice if my curtains stay drawn? Or will the world keep moving without missing a beat? That night I wrote something in my notebook. Maybe I was never meant to be remembered loudly, but maybe I can still leave behind something real. There's one letter I never wrote. Until now. It's to you, my baby. You would have been born in autumn. I remember because the trees were just starting to change when I found out you were growing inside me. I bought a little orange sweater, so tiny it fit in my palm. I planned to tell your father of a dinner. Your father, he would have loved you so much. He had this way of holding my hand like it was made of glass. He would have read to you every night, made pancakes on Sundays, built blanket forts in the living room and called them castles. But you never got to meet him, and I never got to meet you. I lost you both before I even had the chance to say your name out loud. For years I tried to forget. I thought if I buried the memories deep enough, they'd hurt less. But they didn't. They just got quieter, and that quietness followed me everywhere. Sometimes I think I hear your footsteps in the apartment, like the echo of something that almost was. I don't know what kind of person you would have become, boy or girl, shy or loud, curious or calm. I just know I would have loved you with everything I had left, and I would have tried so hard to be better than what I came from, to give you the warmth I never knew. I don't believe in heaven, but if there's a place beyond this, I hope you're there, with him. And maybe someday, if I'm lucky, I'll meet you properly. No pain, no goodbyes, just the sound of a heartbeat I've been missing all my life. It was the kind of morning no one writes about. The sky was grey, but not in a dramatic way, just soft, muted, like a quiet sigh stretched across the sky. I woke up later than usual. There was no alarm, no noise, just the distant hum of a city too busy to notice I'd slept in. The tea was a little too strong. The toast was a little burnt. The book on my lap was one I'd already read. But I stayed in that chair for hours, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender, listening to nothing in particular, watching a bird land on the windowsill. And I thought, this is enough. No one called, no one knocked, no one needed me. And somehow, that didn't feel sad anymore. It felt peaceful, still, whole in a way I hadn't expected. Sometimes we spend our lives chasing things, big things, loud things, love, success, applause. But that morning, with the quiet and the grey and the too strong tea, I felt full of nothing, and yet full enough. It was the first time I didn't ache for more, didn't scroll through the past, or invent new futures. I just sat there and let the morning hold me. And I realized, maybe it's not such a terrible thing to leave the world on a day like that. Tonight, I wrote another letter, but this one wasn't for Daniel, or the baby, or the cat, or even you, whoever's listening now. It was for her, the girl I used to be. The girl who laughed in bookstores and dreamed of cabins by the sea. The girl who thought love would last forever because it had to. I told her I was sorry for how hard I was on her, for all the years I pretended she didn't exist, for calling her weak when she was just hurt. I told her she did her best, that it wasn't her fault, not the silence, not the loneliness, not the leaving. And then I told her, with every word I had left, that I was proud of her. Proud that she kept going, that she kept showing up to days that didn't deserve her, that she didn't let the grief rot her completely, that she found ways, small and quiet, to keep breathing. I folded the letter and placed it under my pillow. Maybe in the next life she'll find it first, and maybe she'll know that the woman she became, though tired, though bruised, survived, and that somewhere, somehow, she mattered, even if no one ever said so out loud. Today, I made a list. Not a grocery list, not a list of chores, but something simpler, final, clean. I wrote down where the spare key is, which neighbor has a copy, who to call if no one hears from me for a while. I labeled the drawers, letters, medical, keep, trash. I even left a note for the landlord. Nothing dramatic, just a thank you for fixing the radiator last winter and for not raising my rent even when he could have. I labeled a small box, donations. Inside, a few scarves, 3 paperbacks I hope someone still reads, and a coat too nice to die in. I placed the notebook, the one filled with all these letters, on the table near the window, not hidden, but not too obvious either. It felt gentle, not like giving up, more like putting things back where they belong. For so long, my life felt scattered, undone, unwitnessed, but now everything has a place, even me. Tonight the rain came again. Not loud, not wild, just a soft tapping against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. I made tea, held the mug with both hands, stood by the window, and watched the streetlights blur into gold through the droplets. And I thought, what a kind way to end a story. Not with sirens, not with screaming, not with loneliness thick like fog. Just rain and quiet. And the feeling that this chapter has truly, gently closed. I sat in my chair, the one I always return to. The cushion worn just right. The blanket tucked just so. And I listened. Not for footsteps, not for phones, just the sound of the world continuing, unbothered, unhurried. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left behind. I felt like I had finally caught up to myself, to the silence, to peace. And maybe, when morning comes, I won't be here to see it. But tonight, as the rain softens and the air grows still, I'm not afraid. I'm not sad. I'm just ready. If you're the one who finds this, maybe you're a neighbor, maybe a nurse, maybe just someone doing their job on a rainy Tuesday morning. You'll open the door, expecting dust, expecting silence. You'll find me, still. Peaceful, I hope. No mess, no chaos, just a body that has finally learned how to rest. And on the table, you'll find this notebook. Maybe you'll be curious. Maybe you'll sit for a moment. Maybe you'll read. And if you do, if you've come this far, then I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be heard after so many years of silence. Thank you for holding these pages, even if only for a moment, because that means for once in my life, someone was listening. You don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to call anyone. There are no instructions, no requests. Just maybe don't throw it away too quickly. Let it sit for a while. Let the words linger in the air a little longer. Because this is all I have. Not a legacy, not a name, just a voice. A quiet one, but mine. Yesterday, just before the rain came, there was a patch of sun on the floor. It came through the window at the perfect angle, lit up the rug in a way I hadn't noticed in years. The light danced through the dust, soft golden flecks swirling like snow that didn't melt. I stood in it, barefoot, like a child. I didn't think, didn't analyze, didn't wonder if anyone was watching. I just stood there. Let it warm my toes, my knees, my chest, my tired heart. And in that small glowing circle, I remembered that even quiet lives have light. Even unnoticed days hold beauty. Even a woman who thought she had disappeared could still feel the sun on her skin. It didn't last long. The clouds came, the light moved on. But for that moment, those brief seconds, I felt alive. Not remembering, not grieving, not waiting, just there. Just me. And it was enough. I've lived a long time. Maybe not in years that would impress anyone, but in silence, in thoughts, in memories. And in the end, what is a life if not a story waiting to be told? I've told mine, in the only way I knew how. Not to beg, not to be pitied, but to be known, just once. Thank you for staying this long, for letting my words breathe, for sitting with me in the dark just long enough to remember there was light. I don't ask to be remembered, but if someday you find yourself in a quiet room, holding a story that no one else wanted, maybe you'll think of me. And maybe that's enough. I was here. I lived. I tried. I loved. I lost. And in the end, I let go. Not out of sadness, but out of peace.
The light is low now. The room has grown still. The tea is cold. The curtains are closed. There is no music, just the sound of this pen moving slowly across the page. This is the part where most stories end. The camera fades. The screen goes black. The music swells. But there's none of that here. Just me and this. One last page. One last sentence. I am not afraid. I am not undone. I am only fading, like a candle that burned quietly until the end, and gave what little warmth it had to the room around it. Thank you for letting me be real one last time. Good night.